As the world awaits the ruling of the International Court of Justice on Israel's war in Gaza, the situation for Palestinians in the region still remains dire. And even now, as Palestinians in Gaza attempt to reach vital aid, they face brutality from the Israeli military. Accusations have emerged of the IDF firing on a crowd of Palestinians queuing for aid in Gaza City. According to health officials, 20 people were killed and more than 150 injured. Al Jazeera reported the incident involved heavy and indiscriminate tank shelling and machine gun fire. The injured were taken to the Al-Shifa hospital, already under severe pressure after suffering shortages of medical staff and supplies. A spokesperson for the Gaza Civil Defense has told CNN this. There are hundreds of injuries. The types of injuries are unbelievable. Some people have lost their limbs. That official added that crews are still trying to reach the injured but are being blocked by Israeli forces. Abu Karif, a Palestinian at the scene, told CNN this. The Israeli military instructs people to go to these locations designated for aid pickup and then they target it. We're never going to find food to eat. We are resorting to food one would normally feed livestock. Those attacks today follow similar targeting of hungry civilians in Gaza City yesterday. In the Zaytun neighborhood, people were forced to flee under gunfire while they waited for much-needed aid. Verified by Reuters, this video shows Palestinians scrambling for safety, with many carrying aid while running. There's a reason that people in the north of Gaza are prepared to risk their lives for food. The aid situation there is far worse than anywhere else in the territory. The World Food Programme has reported that very little aid is making it through to northern Gaza. Their spokesman, Abir Efata, told Reuters that there is a, quote, systematic limitation on getting into the north of Gaza, not just for the World Food Programme. Earlier this month, the UN also accused Israel of systematically denying it access to northern Gaza for the delivery of aid. Israel has also denied these claims in turn, instead choosing to release this video.
Today, the 10,000th truck carrying humanitarian aid entered the Gaza Strip. Since the beginning of the war, Israel has increased its capacity to perform security checks on the trucks by adding security equipment, increasing working hours and manpower, and opening an additional inspection site. Of the trucks sent, close to 99% were approved by Israel. To increase the amount of aid reaching the people of Gaza even more, several steps need to be taken, such as increasing manpower and working hours at the organization distributing the aid, increasing the amount of trucks carrying the aid, and of course, increasing the amount of aid sent by the international community. There is no limit on the amount of food, water, medical supplies, or shelter equipment that Israel is willing to facilitate, because our war is with Hamas, not with the people of Gaza.
Not the jaunty soundtrack. Our war is with Hamas, not with the people of Gaza. The more than 26,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza tell a very different story in their absence. But even if Israel is right about the 10,000 aid trucks having entered Gaza, that only amounts to around 90 per day over the course of this war. With 2.2 million Palestinians in the enclave, that means that one truck is expected to feed more than 25,000 Palestinians. The UN has pointed out that, quote, every single person in Gaza is hungry. And humanitarian agencies have repeatedly said that 500 trucks need to cross the border each day at a minimum to provide for the people there. Now, while starving civilians come under fire in northern Gaza, Israel appears to be busily carrying out a plan that the US told it not to. The Wall Street Journal reports that Israel is building a buffer zone along the Gaza border, despite warnings from the US not to reduce the territory of Palestine. The plan was revealed following the killing of 21 IDF soldiers earlier this week. They were mining buildings just 600 meters inside the border when a Hamas rocket appeared to trigger an explosion, demolishing the buildings with the soldiers inside. Announcing their deaths, IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi said that the soldiers were killed, quote, in the buffer zone between the Israeli communities and Gaza. One problem. The US has reportedly warned against any such zone, discussing Palestinian territorial sovereignty. US State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said in December that, quote, if any proposed buffer zone was inside Gaza, that would be a violation of that principle and something we oppose. Not the war crimes. They're not opposing the war crimes, just the principle. Still, a planned buffer zone certainly fits with the IDF activities in recent weeks. Those IDF soldiers were applauding the demolition of a school in northern Gaza in early December. It lay just a mile from the Israel-Gaza border. And last week, the IDF demolished these 11 residential buildings in Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza, just a few hundred meters from that border. And more footage shows another set of buildings in Khan Yunis, roughly a kilometer from the border, also being destroyed by IDF explosives. According to Israel's Channel 12 News, the IDF has already destroyed 1,100 buildings of the 2,800 needed for such a buffer zone. The IDF has not given any further details on this buffer zone, but a spokesperson did say this. This is part of the imperative actions that are needed in order to implement a defense plan that will provide improved security in southern Israel. The Washington Post has also reported this. Israel has informed the United States that the buffer zone being constructed inside Gaza is only a temporary security accommodation to eliminate Hamas's firing positions close to the border, according to a US official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss diplomatic communications. The revelations come in the context of Benjamin Netanyahu declaring that Israel would maintain, quote, full security control over Gaza when the war ends. But the US doesn't seem to be taking that statement very seriously. Commenting on the proposed buffer zone, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said this. If there needs to be transitional arrangements to enable that to happen, that's one thing. But when it comes to the permanent status of Gaza going forward, we remain clear about not encroaching on its territory. It's not just Blinken who appears to be blind to Israel's true intentions for Gaza. British Foreign Secretary David Cameron has been in Israel, where he called for another pause in the fighting and said this.
It's time for an immediate pause in the fighting, because we've got to not only get the aid in, but crucially, we've got to get those hostages out. And what I think we can do now is plan for how you turn that pause into a permanent, sustainable ceasefire without a return to fighting. That's what I was pushing on him, and that's what I'll be talking about here today. Now, for that to happen, a lot of things would have to happen. You'd have to see the Hamas leadership leave Gaza. You'd have to see the instruments of terrorism being dismantled in Gaza. But you've also got to see a political perspective so that Palestinian people can see that there is a route to having a Palestinian state, to having a new future. So it's all those things together that need to form part of a proper plan.
Calling for a ceasefire, but still parroting lines about the dismantling instruments of terrorism in Gaza. Nearly half the buildings in Gaza have been damaged beyond repair. Half that territory is rubble, but sure, more dismantling is what's needed. And with Western leaders still farting out this weak rhetoric, all eyes are now turned to the International Court of Justice, because the court will deliver its interim ruling on the genocide case brought against Israel by South Africa tomorrow at noon UK time. We'll, of course, be covering all the findings there.